So in this module, we're going to be talking about IoT or the Internet of Things. Sounds very ambiguous, almost non-technical in nature, but it actually is really relevant in this space in data security and cybersecurity because of the complexity of where it is now and where it's going. So when you think about the Internet of Things, we're talking about smart devices. And if you think of smart devices, isolated on their own. It's just a device, right? It's kind of sits, you have an Amazon Alexa, or you have a smart TV or a smart refrigerator or even smart cars, right? And you think of these things as sort of individual items within this space out there in cyberspace, but they're actually all interconnected, right? And how they interconnect is the backbone of what we call the Internet of Things. That's what the Internet of Things is. How do all of these things communicate, talk to each other, connect? So what is going on in the background? Some of it's defined, but a lot of it is not defined. What I mean by that is there are certain ways that certain products will talk to each other. If you have Amazon products, for example, they're all talking to each other because they're all part of the same ecosystem. Same thing with Google, but there are other things that they work with that they have to talk to as well. So if you take an Alexa device, for example, it talks to your refrigerator, it talks to your TV, it talks to audio equipment. All these different things interact, and then your car as well. Some of these cars are connected to Google and Amazon, and a lot of different smart watches and whatnot. So there's wearable stuff. There's home devices. All these devices have to communicate some way, in some shape or form. And what happens especially in this Internet of Things industry, what happens is a lot of these devices, like the home assistive devices like Alexas and Googles and whatnot, they came out really fast because there was this huge demand for them. People like, this is wonderful. I could ask Alexa or Amazon anything I want, and it'll tell me exactly what I want whenever I want to. So what happened is these devices were created really quickly, really fast, and they were in homes like crazy, crazy fast. And the same thing goes for the smart cars, the smart refrigerators, the smart now ovens and washing machines. All of this stuff was sort of put together and put in homes in a very insular way, insular view. So companies came out with these devices, not necessarily thinking about holistically how these would talk to each other, not necessarily thinking about how these would even work within the existing ecosystem. They thought about it a little bit, but their main drive was to get the product out there, make sure it worked as a smart device, and then figure everything else out. Well, the figure everything else out part was also in the cybersecurity aspect of it. So they would come out with these devices that are hardware devices for the most part, right? You could do firmware upgrades in some of these things, but they're hardware devices, and firmware is really limited to the capacity of your devices. So what happened is these devices came out, cybersecurity and your data, the protection of that data was sort of a secondary thought. The primary thought was to, guess what, make money on these devices, right? Make sure that they worked, make sure that consumers could use these devices effortlessly to make their lives easier. These smart devices make our lives easier. There was not as much thought about these devices actually worrying about security. And then you start to hear that as these devices started to get hacked. And you heard, everybody's heard the stories of some of these Amazon devices that were tapped into and listened to, and it still happens today. You can look some of these things up. These devices are hacked into, especially now as we're 5, 6, 7 years into these devices in our homes. A lot of people still have the older devices because they're very basic devices. Not a lot can break in them. So they still have their old devices and they're updated, like I mentioned, with firmware. The problem is that firmware has limitations, and you can't stay in front of the hackers and those people that are trying to do bad things with these devices. You can't really stay in front of that when you have really old technology, and the capacity to protect us on that old technology has really, it dwindles down year by year by year because it's limited by the hardware that's in it. And remember, that hardware was really not designed to begin with to be protective in nature, to protect our data, to protect our security, cybersecurity wise. So it was really not intended or designed to be protective in nature. Number one, because they didn't care as much when they put out these devices; they just wanted it to work. But also, it wasn't considered because people didn't think necessarily that those things were possible to hack through some of these devices that support or on this Internet of Things backbone. They just didn't think in those terms until it actually happened. And then you started hearing it happen, and we're sort of backwards engineering to try and stay on top of how to keep this Internet of Things safe. So there's really two big pieces. The Internet of Things is really evolving quickly. To try and have a discussion or cohesiveness around how to secure the Internet of Things is really fractured. It's not just, hey, let's have a discussion about this and figure it out. You're talking about different companies with different products, big companies, small companies, all these different companies trying to come together and create these smart devices to make money, not to protect your security. They're doing it to make money. So to have even a conversation around that, to make it protective in nature, or to make sure that we are doing things to protect our data and protect us from a cybersecurity lens. That is not, there's not even a common ground with that yet, coupled with the fact that we're dealing with technology that came out. It really wasn't intended to protect us in the first place, is getting older. And now the capacity, even now as they're trying to sort of backwards engineer and go back and say, hey, let's make sure this stuff is safe for our consumers, because we don't want that backlash, and we want to protect our consumers as well. But it's older devices, so the people that are hacking into these things or doing something malicious with them are using really old technology to try and hack into. So it's a lot easier to hack into the older technology because the technology for the hackers and those people that are doing malicious things has advanced now 4, 5, 6, 7 years since these devices came out. And that goes for cars. You have an older car that has smart features that can only be updated so much based on the hardware. The devices, the home assistive devices, the same thing. Your refrigerators, all these things, time is not beneficial when it comes to cybersecurity and data hacking, because it makes it a lot easier to get into these systems. The older technology, you have newer ways, newer technology that can hack into these things at a much more efficient and quicker rate. And they're really, it's really easy, much easier for them to do on the older technology. But even with the new technology, there's still ways of hacking into these devices, because it's sort of this convoluted system that really doesn't have one cohesive way of looking at things, of protecting us, because, like I said, there's so many different aspects, so many different companies, so many different products that are sort of smart devices that sit on this Internet of Things backbone. So just keep considering that piece. Think about the Internet of Things from a lens of really ambiguity and really a challenge to make it even possible to stay ahead of the curve as far as our data being hacked or us being protected with cybersecurity. So enjoy this module, and I will be seeing you soon.